Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we are looking at two of the most popular multimedia server applications available for most NAS server brands out there. Of course, I'm talking about Plex Media Server and Jellyfin. Now, these are two apps that are available, again, for your Synology, your QNAP, your Acer Store, your TerraMaster, your TrueNAS. It is incredibly multifunctional. Well, alongside that, it is possible to utilize these server-side applications alongside a whole host of client-side applications too. And in today's video, we're going to be comparing these two platforms from the perspective of a NAS owner. Okay, so although we are going to be talking about the specific features of both of these applications quite a lot, this is part one in a trilogy. We're also going to be looking at MD later on as well in another video. This video is more designed for users who are utilizing and building their own NAS servers or buying a turnkey NAS solution to convert that into a multimedia server. And although for this video we are going to be utilizing a Synology NAS throughout this, but it is worth highlighting that you can use a plethora of different NAS brands out there, from the DIY to the off-the-shelf solutions, and we will be talking about the level of support afforded to you on those different platforms. But before we go any further, a few disclaimers straight off the bat. Now, I mentioned this is part of a trilogy of videos. There is a fourth part regarding transcoding on the way, but a lot of this has been made possible and detailed in a greater amount of detail here in this article linked in the description. It's just in progress at the moment. I've nearly finished it. And in this article, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there, we've gone through all of the things that these three platforms can do, what they can't do, where they differ, what is free, what is not free, and ultimately help you decide which one of these is best suited for your multimedia server. But it was made enormously possible thanks to the help of this chap here, Protector de Zora, who's been working on an ongoing project on behalf of a lot of these multimedia platforms for streaming alongside third-party ones, and amalgamated them all into some great tables there. So again, I've linked to them in the article. Hopefully there's a link in the description as well. But again, that's an ongoing project there as well. I recommend you check that out. But for now, let's crack straight on with what we are on about. So as mentioned, we're using Synology's platform here, but there is support on a multitude of different platforms out there. And for all of these, although you could use the application that your NAS arrives with, again, all of the NAS brands that we talk about here on the channel have their own video app installed. In the case of Synology, it's Video Station or DS Video. Even though they are available, it's worth highlighting most users really like using the likes of Plex or Jellyfin. This is because they not only allow you to access remotely and via the network all of that media that you've been collecting for the last few decades, but on top of that, it presents it in a wonderfully slick way that is comparable to the likes of Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus, and more. So it gives you all of that graphical user interface utilization there on all your client devices. On top of that, it allows you to view all of this media with all of the cast information. It allows you, if we open up, for example, Plex here, let's go into the movie section there and put them side by side. If we go into the same movie side by side, it allows you to have all the cast information, the synopsis, reviews, trailers, extra information and more, all of that rolled in. You can see the appeal of it. But what is it that differs all of these platforms? And more precisely for this video, Jellyfin and Plex. Well, first things first, a lot of you either aren't aware or are slightly curious about the difference in pricing. Because that's right, even though you paid for your NAS hardware, be it turnkey, Synology, QNAP, Acer Store, TerraMaster, or you've gone DIY and built your own and then used TrueNAS or Unraid or something like that, some of the service on some of these media platforms cost money. Now, if we go back to the article I mentioned earlier on, we can scroll down to the first section here. And as you can see, if we look at this, let's zoom in a little bit there. Hopefully I'm not blocking that with my camera there on screen. You can see there right now with these platforms, and we're only focusing at the moment on Jellyfin and Plex. Jellyfin is completely free. All of the NAS installers, server-side apps are free, or the client apps are free, whereas on Plex, some of it is free. Now, what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? Well, as I remove the power supply from my laptop because the fans are kicking in. What that means is, in order to keep these projects funded as much as possible, a lot of these brands, to keep them flush, to keep them updated with security fixes, to innovate, to R&D, and ultimately to improve this experience, some platforms, again, like Plex, will choose to add a paid premium element. And this allows users that are going to take the most take the most out of these platforms to be the ones that subsidize the platform more than light users. Now, with Plex, that comes down to a Plex Pass, which comes down to £3.99 a month, or I've got worked it out in the calculations there. It's $4.99 a month, $39.99 a month, I should say, $4.99 a day even, and you can go for an unlimited lifetime subscription in dollars at the moment for $119.99. Now, again, on Jellyfin, it is completely free. So in terms of pricing, Jellyfin walks away with a very early advantage for a lot of users, because Plex, I would argue, between the two of them is the more slick platform. It also has that paid premium support there, and it is more user-friendly, as you'll see later in this video. And to get there, to do that user experience research, to do that overall arching design on the Plex platform, it has required funding, for good or for bad. Later on, we'll talk about some of the features that aren't available on the free version of Plex that you do need that premium subscription for, that will annoy some of you. But for now, when it comes to the pricing and the old bit of wonga, again, you can't really argue with Jellyfin just being ultimately the more cost-effective platform overall. Which brings us to our next section as we scroll down. Features, functions, and supported formats. Straight away, it's worth highlighting immediately that there is practically no thing that you can do in Plex that isn't available in Jellyfin. Back in that article that I talked about earlier on, we've already got a detail at the top of the things that are available across all three of those platforms. Again, today we're focusing on just Plex and Jellyfin. And with all of those platforms, as good as all of that is, it's worth remembering that some of those services require a subscription to access them. So although both platforms have a similar level of supported features and functions, just remember that some of them for Plex, although it's there, they go behind that little paywall there. So moving away from that, we look through some of the features and functions that are available. We can look at, for example, with Plex, that the presentation of a lot of these features and the integration of those features is way smoother when it comes to the features that are added, the recommendations, and some of the way that the user can experience them, particularly on the client side. If we open up the clients for both of these tools here side by side, so this is the Windows client, it's worth highlighting that the way they're presented to the end user are just a lot clearer when it comes to whether you're going to be going through your Plex Media server, different files and folders, configuring the settings of that server. So if we go into the server settings here, we can go in and check out which server settings are available in the background of both of these. Open them up side by side. Immediately it seems on the face of it that Jellyfin is a lot clearer in its presentation there. However, that's because most of the options are not visible here. If you want to see all of the options, you click dashboard and boom, there is that enormous degree of customization. And straight away, the configuration of Jellyfin is just that little bit more complex, from adding the individual multimedia supported apps, services, features, codecs and more. But on top of that, even some things that unfortunately, although a little techie, should be a lot more straightforward. Let's take, for example, hardware transcoding. If we go into hardware transcoding on the Plex side of things, we can go into the transcoder agent. And then from there, even if we go into advanced settings, we can just say a nice liberal, we want it to use all of the CPU stuff, just prioritize quality, prioritize playback, nice and simple there. And we can click make my CPU hurt. Apart from that, you can enable certain preset features and functions, but that's really it. It's nice and quite straightforward in order to commit a lot of those conversion options there, and then just click save when we need it. On the Jellyfin side, however, if we make our way into the playback area there and we look at transcoding, we have to be quite specific about our acceleration agent there that we're going to be prioritizing there. And again, it's whether you want it to allow certain transcoding actions. And again, just a lot of those configuration options are a little bit more intimidating in the way they're presented to you. And it really does go on a little bit there. You don't have to use them. And of course, transcoding, conversion, call it what you will, which we'll talk in a little bit more detail later, isn't for everyone. It might well be something you're never going to use, but still nonetheless, you know, it's definitely going to be a more complex experience. Talking of complex experiences there, if we make our way back onto the desktop of our Synology there, we can see that in the App Center, I have installed both Plex Media Server and Jellyfin, which is good news, right? Well, it's not without a slight catch. Because first and foremost, the Plex Media Server application was available on the official Synology App Center. It was right there. We can install it, click, and it's in. It is listed as a third-party contributor, but it's still available there. And that is the case, again, with QNAP, Acerstore, TerraMaster. If you move on to the open source TrueNAS and stuff like that, as plugins, most of them list that app within their available centers there that can be, you know, created as a container or installed directly as an app within things like Linux. But when it comes to Jellyfin, once again, that steep little learning curve turns its head, because very, very few platforms provide an installer within their own app centers for server-side Jellyfin support. So in the case of Jellyfin on this NAS, I had to install an unofficial third-party community app, and then from there find Jellyfin as a third-party app. And you have to go into your NAS's settings and allow it to install third-party applications. You effectively have to kind of sign a digital waiver, if you will, that says, I understand what I'm doing is counter to what the brands have certified this device is able to do and support. Now, you don't have to rely on an App Center app there. You can go straight into a container. So quickly switching over to another NAS that has the Docker application, we can go into Docker, and as you can see, the alternative means to install Jellyfin would be to just go straight in, enter the registry here, and just start searching again for Jellyfin. You'll find it, and then you can install it as a container. But again, the container installation isn't as smooth as putting in an installer, and you're still running this as a kind of semi-contained application there within the Docker administration. So a lot of users may find this a little bit intimidating when they want just a one-click open installer, good to go, which is kind of one of the main appealing points for a lot of users that look at Plex Media Server versus that of Jellyfin, because of the ease of deployment and kind of that kind of easy to use paid premium service that Plex is clearly trying to advertise. If Plex, I hate seagulls, once upon a time had a kind of indie alternate to the streaming platforms vibe, that is long since past. And on their platform now, they're considered to be the kind of paid for big guy industry of the streaming platforms out there. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but once you go through a lot of those listed supported services, you do find that a lot of these services that you may wish to use in your media server, such as SharePlay, where you have lots of users watching the same thing together, hardware transcoding that we've talked about, support of certain codecs or certain compression techniques, as well as support of live TV or DVR plugins, require that subscription service from Plex in a way where Jellyfin gives you them straight away for free off the bat if you want them. You require a lot more configuration, but the option for it is there, and instead of paying in money, you're paying in time. But next up, let's move on to the design, the skin, the feel, the customization of both Plex and Jellyfin. Now, for customization on these platforms, it's worth highlighting that when it comes to Plex, you are really limited in the range of customization open to you with this particular media server player. Whether it is you're accessing it via the web browser, as you can see here, or you're using those client tools that we talked about earlier on, the amount of customization on your dashboard on Plex is really, really limited. Generally, the user interface is largely what you see is what you get. And again, although you can manage multiple servers there, if we go straight into the one that we're looking at here, this is pretty much what everyone sees. There are ways to change this UI as well as patch your Plex library into third-party apps, but the level of customization in Plex Media Server is pretty small when it comes to the user interface there. Now, within Jellyfin, it's a very different story. Not extensively, but in two main areas there is difference. So for example, the ability to change the theme at a moment's notice to a completely different colored design that goes to screensavers, and again this extends to the individual applications there for all your client devices, and again you can move forward from that to kind of mirror other UIs in your environment. You can even choose, if you like, rather than displaying it in the standard PC interface, you can force it to show what a TV user would show. And again, that extends to if you're using access to Jellyfin on, say, a mobile device, you can change the UI on your mobile to have the appearance of that PC for those of you that want that customization, or just leave it to auto, and then it will just give you whatever it is that it reads from the UI that you're accessing there. Another element of customization comes down to adding add-ons and plugins. Now, adding plugins and extra services and like bridging tools for other applications and services to Plex is supported. There are options for doing it. However, when it comes to using those add-ons and adding on these services, the range of supported plugins and add-ons on Plex is way smaller. If you go to the plugin section there isn't really much of a range of, there isn't like an app repository that you might see on the things like Kodi or any kind of app center there. The ability to add certain features is pretty small, with the bulk of them being rolled in to Plex Media Server itself as one of its Plex services. So normally when these add-ons come in, a lot of them just immediately land behind that Plex pass. So as you can see, the ability to change colors, Plex pass only. If you want to change some of those advanced settings there, Plex pass only. If you want to enable some of those features, as you can see there, they're all Plex pass only. Now, for those of you that want to use add-ons and extras to connect Jellyfin with other services, be they streaming services or local home tools and client hardware and client-based software, in the case of Jellyfin, you can just go straight away into the dashboard, then scroll down and then find the plugin section. They both have support of utilizing API connected services, but in the case of the plugins here, you can either go with the plugins that you install during the setup for things like metadata scraping and more, or go through catalogs of existing repositories, and you can add more repositories over time, which you can find online to later add even more services, add-ons and extras and bridging client tools with other supported platforms there. So the level of customization in the design and UI on Jellyfin, as well as the ability to customize the server and the connected services, is just better on Jellyfin. And remember, this was the free platform out of the two of them there. It's definitely something worth bearing in mind there if you are considering a media server that you want to evolve and graduate over time. Next up, let's talk about the user interface and the customization during playback. And for that, what we're going to do is just very quickly play exactly the same file side by side here on either servers. And we're going to pause them both, because it's worth remembering, as you can see from the IPs at the top of the screen here, although we're using the same server, we are still connecting to it on the same client hardware. And we are using OBS here at the bottom, which will result in a drop in frame rate. This video is not about reviewing the NAS server itself, because different NAS servers have different levels of hardware. But what we're looking at is what we can actually configure and what the options are for the end user when they're going through the files that they're playing. So the Plex playback setting there is a great deal easier to sort of read there. And again, we are running a desktop interface here. But again, we can, enable and change some of that codec there. We've got a list of supported compression that we can go with there on the side of Plex. In the case of Jellyfin, we can go there and change that quality there, and it lists the available range, unsurprisingly there. We can go in and find out more information about the file that we're playing there. So let's go back into the playback info. We're not getting a great deal of information there that we can configure. We're just getting the very basic stuff. We can do picture in picture. They both support picture in picture there. And again, just generally, the user interface is quite similar between the two of them there. Although, when it comes to playback on these devices, another thing that's worth highlighting between these two is the idea of offline play and transcoding. Now, offline play, some of you might not see the versatility of it. It's the idea that rather than when you're on the fly, on a commute, on a plane, in a hotel or whatever, and you want to access the media on your NAS, you might want to, in advance, download some of those files. Now, both Plex and Jellyfin support offline downloads. That is the ability to download files to your device in advance and play them from within the device. You can just go ahead and you can download a file lovely and easily. So if we go again into these files here, we'll go into the films library again. From there, if you choose to, you can go ahead and download these files locally. But once again, it's a premium level app. If you try to do this on the Plex side, you will need a Plex pass in order to download files to your mobile device, to any localized device. And again, support is limited on the Plex side, such as if you're running an Amazon Fire Stick, a Fire TV, and you're trying to download files from within Plex, you're not going to be able to do that on a Fire TV with its limited storage. But still, nonetheless, the ability to download files locally is there. And all of these apps and services are tremendously user-friendly and easy within the mobile applications and more for both of them. It's just worth highlighting that they are paid for in many cases on the Plex. It's not a lot of money, I know, but when you've already spent money on the hardware for your server, all of that time you spent setting it up, and yes, these platforms need to be subsidized, but a lot of you are going to resent the option that you're going to have to pay to utilize things like hardware transcoding on your system, which brings us to hardware transcoding. Why is this such a sticking point for some users, and why does it always seem to be a subject that never really goes away? Well, when it comes to playing files, and we'll bring back that article once again, sorry for the self-promotion, hardware transcoding is the ability or conversion to change a file on the fly, or perhaps in advance in some cases, to a better suited version of that file for the destination client. That is the device you're playing on. Now, there's some examples there. So, for example, if you were to play back a file that is a different supported compression technique to that which might be supported on your device. So, for example, the most classic example is HEVC, although AV1 and newer generation open source compression is widely supported now on Plex and Jellyfin and MB at the time of recording. But say HEVC, which is kind of a paid license compression technique there. For those that aren't aware, compression techniques are referred to in media when you have a huge cinema production that then gets downsized to something you can watch on the comfort of your sofa. If you are utilizing a NAS with decent enough hardware, you can basically tell the system to convert that file on the fly, so the person watching it is watching a version of it without the worry of the compression license, the HEVC, being a problem there. Where's the problem lie? The difference between hardware transcoding and software transcoding. Software transcoding is largely free to everyone. It's when the system will use raw system power with that CPU there and a little bit of memory to convert the file on the fly, with the hope that it can convert 1 second of footage quicker than 1 second of footage can be played back, because otherwise it's not going to be able to convert it in time on the fly. Now, hardware transcoding is when the CPU has integrated graphics on board, which is dedicated and specialized to the changing of media files, or you're using a graphics card. And on that side, on the server side client, hardware transcoding uses less power and is far more efficient at converting that file. And it doesn't just extend to files that are running a different compression technique. Perhaps you own a 4K version of a multimedia file, but you're there at a train station, you're in a hotel abroad, you're sitting on the beach, and you are looking for a much more convenient version of that file. Perhaps you're on a limited internet connection. Perhaps you're using a device that if you try to run a 4K version of Avatar 2, is just going to heat the device, rinse your battery, and just be clunky to play. And you're happier to run a 480, maybe even a 360p version there. On-the-fly transcoding will allow that to happen. So there's a lot, that doesn't even extend to audio formats as well, where you might be watching a movie where the license of a compression technique or the resolution isn't a problem, but the audio codec or the audio file format is a problem. So things like audiobooks or particularly dense media that comes in like MP4A or FLAC, FLAC, or ACC media as well, these can be problematic and require transcoding. Now, as a long tangent as this is, the reason I'm bringing it up is because, as mentioned earlier on, if you want to do this in Plex hardware transcoding, remember, utilizing your hardware to do it, you need to have a Plex pass. That's right, you need to have the premium package in order to convert your media using the hardware inside your system, whereas on Jellyfin that is available to you off the bat. I'm going to try to get the right tabs there open on screen on the fly. If you want to use transcoding, it's just available to you whenever you want it there. Now again, it has to be argued in defense of Plex a little bit that they have had to develop their software to be able to harness different video drivers, to know what they're doing for the app to efficiently use the onboard graphical components to convert that file on the fly to the best of its ability, which takes research and development, which takes time. They have team members that need to be paid to do this kind of work, and therefore it kind of makes sense for that Plex pass. But there's no avoiding that there is a slight horrible feeling that an end user needs to pay a little bit extra in order to access their own hardware to the best of its ability that the media server is playing on there. So if your multimedia collection is comprised of quite a lot of difficult media, so that is to say that either you're running files that don't run well on your client hardware, so again your sofa, your phone, your tablet, your whatever, because of HEVC support and licensing, because of client-side hardware restrictions, or because of file format restrictions that are not supported by the end player, this may have to be something you have to factor in to your decision between Plex and Jellyfin. Now, up to this point, it might seem that I've been properly putting the boot into Plex and championing Jellyfin. Well, take my word for it, for a little while now, we are unfortunately going to absolutely dogpile on Jellyfin, because one of its biggest disadvantages to both new NAS users and users that want to have a multimedia server, are familiar with Jellyfin, but want to distribute it with their friends and family, is to do with supported clients. Supported client applications and supplied server-side applications there, particularly if you're going to run multiple servers there. Now, what I mean by that is because although we alluded to it earlier on when we were looking at the Synology NAS there, the range of installers on both NAS platforms and client installers for the myriad of different client devices in our home environments is absolutely just insane on Plex. Plex have gone the extra mile and have pretty much an app for everything. You name it, there is an app for it, both on the server client side, all of those NAS brands and the open source ones I mentioned, and the established clients, from everything from Apple and Android and Windows and more, right the way down to some real out there ones as well. Even when you look at this list here of available applications for the server OS, so this is the app that you install where your multimedia is going to be streaming from the server side, look at the range of difference there. No, yes, there's just nothing but yeses on the Plex side there. Add to that the fact that some of these yeses are because they are Docker, means it's not even a one-click installer. Some of these require you to install a container. Some of them require you to add additional add-ons like FFmpeg, which is a video streaming efficiency and compression tool, added to it as well. And as you can see, the level of supported services are just not really there on Jellyfin. Now, one, again, they're not a premium paid service, so this shouldn't come as a huge surprise. And some of this I would argue, particularly when we get to the client side, will be quite damning. But still, nonetheless, when it comes to setting up the Plex server, regardless of your NAS or even multimedia hardware, if you're not going to use a NAS and you're just going to repurpose an old PC or a Mac Mini, look at that range of difference between these two. Now, scrolling down even further, we can get to the client side support. And when it comes to the client side support, this is where things get a little grayer, but still not fabulous for users that were hoping to take advantage of freemium, if you will, or open source support on Jellyfin on their client devices, because not only does Plex still continue to have a larger arrangement of supported client-side apps, but some of them, although they are linked and paid for, because some of them to live on an app center requires cost. So in some cases, they have put it on a premium there. So in this case, for example, with iOS, it's $5 or server license. In other words, if you have a Plex Pass, you can download the iOS app, or you pay $5 for a one-off access there. At least they are available. Whereas on the Jellyfin side, and I'm sorry if I've called it jellyfish in this video, by the way, just because of the jellyfish Plex files that I test, you can see there just the level of those applications and services are either not available in some cases, or worse still, require third-party patch through. So a number of users may use things like VLC in order to access the media server to work as a go-between, because there isn't a native client app readily available, or at least container app access on their client hardware. Now, those of us that are a lot more tech versed, it's not going to be a problem, is it? Because we know what we're doing. We know how to knock up a container for 5 minutes work. Let's have some lunch. What if you're setting it up for your parents, your grandparents, that weird uncle that wants to have every episode of Yes Prime Minister? That guy, well, you say to him, you just got to set up a container. He's just going to get a plastic tub from Wilco, isn't he? And that's my point. When it comes to Plex, yes, it's premium, yes, it's paid for, but a lot of that support does go into making their platform as accessible and as intuitive as possible. And although up to this point it seems like I've really been rooting for Jellyfin, there's no denying that Plex has a level of access that is unparalleled. Which leads us to our conclusion, and unsurprisingly, I think, as I've hammered this now a bunch of times, the real benefits of Jellyfin do come down to that open source support. So as you can see, the largely free client and server-side applications. I say largely because sometimes you do need a bridging tool in between. Many more formats supported. We didn't even really touch on the fact that in Plex, although there is support of audiobooks, music, photos, and obviously your TV shows, your movies and music, on Jellyfin there's comic books, e-books, and a bunch of other supported formats of media which you can also crawl with those databases we talked on earlier on. Again, a wider range of plugins being available on Jellyfin is hugely advantageous for a number of users. The live TV services, or if you want to use a digital video tuner connected to your server of choice, Plex, that's another one that's behind that wall, whereas in Jellyfin, ready available, and its high degree of customization and efficient hardware utilization for transcoding, because you can configure it quite specifically, as well as offline downloads not being behind a premium pass, is great. But it's not always perfect, with a steeper learning curve for both setup and clients, fewer ready-to-go installers, lacking some of the system configuration and backup options that we'll talk about in a moment, and lacking that paid premium support which some users might want when they don't know what they're doing and don't want to rely on forum chasing. That is something that's going to appeal to some other users. But when it comes to Plex Media Server, on the other hand, again, way easier to set up, so user-friendly. A tremendous amount of time and energy has gone into improving that graphical user interface. Having those support options is going to be appealing to some, and it is technically cheaper than MB, something we'll talk about in another video. Another thing I'll talk about, and again I just touched on it there before we go back to the cons, is backing up your server configuration is a lot easier and broader in Plex Media Server than it is on Jellyfin. There is options in the dashboard center for you to run backups of your configuration, but it's not really deep. There are things you can back up. You can sort of back up some of the user account information there, as well as enable that quick connecting to access it remotely. But the level of backup services from within the server, so you can reinstate the server to a previous point and save the configuration, is just not there. But on the Plex side of things, you can back up your configuration if you choose very easily, and it'll allow you to just offload it and save that configuration and restore it to an earlier point in case things go wrong and you want to reinstate the original configuration of your Plex Media Server system. But Plex, again, even though it's paid for, is not perfect. Again, one of its biggest downfalls is all of those services that are behind that subscription wall. Again, your offline downloads, your transcoding, your live TV, all of them are behind that limited wall there. And some of them, although some of them make sense, things like the live TV add-on there, I can understand maybe putting things like the live TV guide on there. Makes maybe sense, but given live TV tuners are hardware and the CPU that you're going to be utilizing for transcoding is hardware, both of which you have paid for yourself, I think it's a little bit disingenuous for Plex to say that you need a Plex pass in order to access them, regardless of the R&D that's going into it. Yes, you can go ahead and do a one-off payment if you choose, but that's still, for me, not quite good enough for some users that have already possibly overspent on either building or buying a network-attached storage solution for their multimedia, but now suddenly find in order to take advantage of these great services, they're just going to have to pay a little bit more. Really, it comes down to which one is more user-friendly for you and ultimately which one is going to be best suited to your own configuration. If you're running a real easygoing setup, you're using quite a low-powered, efficient-powered NAS system, you don't have a hugely complex range of multimedia types, you're not going to be running live TV on there, transcoding and audio-video formats aren't really a barrier to you, you're just looking to stream over DLNA and enjoy your media, Plex is a really great choice for you in terms of the ease of its setup, ease of configuration, and that the free version will cover all of that I just said without you having to spend an extra penny at all. However, if you've got a more evolved setup in mind, you are looking to add things like live TV, you had a myriad of very complex high definition multimedia that you're going to be streaming to many users in different places, and you don't mind putting the extra time in to configure it perfectly with a high level of customization and unique kind of presentation to your server to make it truly your own, Jellyfin is definitely the better choice for you, because on that platform the level of customization and add-ons is just winner over all, and particularly when you can really cater the system down to your own needs, be they in terms of the multimedia you're playing and the range of file formats that you're going to enjoy. Jellyfin just wins overall for you users. But this has been our comparison of Plex Media Server and Jellyfin running on NAS servers. Remember, that was the focus of this video, not the broader overview of these platforms. In our next video, we're going to be comparing Jellyfin with MB. MB, again, a lot like Plex, but a little bit more open source, a little bit more configurable, and a little bit more indie than the likes of Plex. So I can't wait to look at that. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Again, strongly recommend you check out the article in the description that will go through all of the comparisons. It should be ready by the time of this video going live, and it compares all three of those platforms there, and again goes into quite a lot of detail. And remember to check out the online resources of Protector Desura as he works on comparing a lot of this information, as well as, if you found this video helpful, why not use the link at the bottom to take you to Amazon? Because not only, I know if you were going to shop from Amazon anyway, great stuff, please use that button, and this video has helped you, because if you use that, not only will it take you to Amazon in your own local region, but more importantly, anything you buy will result in a kickback coming to here at NAS Compares, which allows us to keep doing what we do. Don't use it if you're not going to shop from Amazon anyway, but if you were and this video helped you, please use that. Finally, if you're still looking for support and assistance on your own NAS setup there for hardware or software reasons, then why not use the free advice section that we supply over on NAS Compares. If you head over to that section, not only can we give you free advice and support on your configuration of choice, but on top of that, we've linked to a bunch of other platforms that will be able to assist you, and allow us to, share this knowledge and make more and more content as well. So check out the links that we link to there, as well as if you need free advice, head over or use the free community support forum over at Ask NAS Compares, where we answer your questions regularly and help everyone with their data storage solutions. So again, use those links. I hope you found this video helpful. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.